guys, welcome to another video. I know this is a bit of a location change for this video, but I hope you guys don't mind. Today I'm here to talk about my most disappointing reads of 2021. I know this is like a video that I tend to be a bit bummed out about because usually when I go into reading a book, I don't want to go in with the expectation that I'm not going to enjoy it. It's usually quite the opposite. I choose the books that I read based on how excited I am for it. With that being said, most of these books I was really excited about, and hence why the disappointment is significant, I suppose. By the way, this is totally unrelated to this video, but in the mail today I got my new phone case. Isn't this the most cutest phone case ever? It's got like lemons on it. It's just so cute. I ended up getting this from an Etsy shop and I absolutely love this. My phone case definitely needed an upgrade. So yes, I'm actually really loving this phone cover and I'm hoping to get more kind of designs in the future for this because it's just so cute. I don't know. Something about lemons and the color scheme for this is just so pretty. I love it. So without further ado, let's get on with my most disappointing reads. This was going to be my top 5 most disappointing reads, but I will say that I will put this particular book as like a special mention because it was the worst rated book for the year, and it is The Scarlet Plague by Jack London. Now I will say it's not entirely bad, I suppose. It's just that it was really boring, and I think a lot of the stuff that it introduced was quite interesting, but it didn't keep me engaged, and I was just overall not interested, nor was the characters very interesting. I thought that this was gonna be a bit more, you know, deeper and more philosophical, and hoped that it would speak more about humanity and whatnot, but honestly it didn't really have that. This was a very forgettable read, and I've honestly forgotten why I rated it only 2 stars on Goodreads. That probably says something about it. It's also very short. I had it on my TBR list for my Spooktober TBR and I was thoroughly disappointed. I wish I picked up a different book from that TBR. The reason why I ended up picking this up was because it was short and I thought that I could get through it very quickly, but because I was so bored I ended up reading it slowly anyway. Sad times. I wasn't expecting to like this that much, so I suppose my disappointment level was not as extreme as some of the other ones on this list today. So this is just a special mention, but not really a part of this list because it was forgettable. So the first one is a short story collection. I had such high hopes for this one. It is Verge by Linda Yuknavitch. Just the cover alone was so aesthetic. I really wanted to love this, but unfortunately I only liked a handful, maybe like 4 or 5 short stories in this collection of multiple short stories. As you can see, there's like a content of all the short stories that are in this book, and I only enjoyed like 4 or 5 of them. Most of these just weren't interesting for me. I think the content in it was quite mature and intense for some of them. Some of them were a bit more lighthearted. Well, not, I wouldn't say lighthearted, but they didn't have graphic things in it, but some did. So it was a bit awkward sometimes, especially what happens to certain characters in some of these short stories. It's just weird and odd, and I had certain expectations for it. I do like weirder stories, even if it's more on the surreal kind of spectrum. I do enjoy those sort of stories. However, this one was just weird in a different way, in more of an uncomfortable, awkward way, and so I just did not enjoy a lot of the short stories in this. It was just odd. The one thing that I appreciated from this short story collection was the fact that each of the stories focused on the perspective of someone that you wouldn't really get the perspective of in a lot of mainstream stories and novels, and so the voice of these characters are intentionally picked to be like the misfits of society, and so I did enjoy that aspect, but just the stories themselves I didn't really connect with most of them. So disappointing. I did think the writing style was okay, but overall the stories, the characters just weren't my jam. I really wanted to like this collection. It's unfortunate. Would I read anything else by Linda Yuknavitch? Maybe, possibly, but I'm not convinced, especially after reading this. Let's just move on. The The next book that I have here is Jim Butcher's Stormfront. Now, I did enjoy this book, but it was a slight disappointment because I've heard a ton of hype with the Dresden Files series, but I think the first book isn't really up to par with what the book community hypes this series up to be. I definitely think a lot of the humor is quite aged, and let me just say it has not aged well. There were certain aspects that I did enjoy. I do find the setting very interesting. The fact that the main character is a wizard living in modern day society and is helping the police department solve murder cases, and I just thought that the merge between modern day world and fantasy was an interesting kind of setting. Also enjoyed the fact that the character was a bit more cowardly and a bit more incompetent than I thought it would be, so definitely a flawed individual. However, I think the overall story was a little bit boring. I think the main kind of murder mystery that surrounded this first book was interesting. A lot of the crime cases are quite gruesome. The stakes get progressively higher, especially the danger that this main character is in. However, like I said, the humor doesn't really land well with me. I'm not particularly a fan of the main character yet. After a few books in the series, he might grow on me, but I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan of the main character. So this one was a bit of a letdown, but I will continue on with the series. I will give it a chance, maybe 3 more times, and if each book my experience is the same, then I'll probably drop the series and not continue, because this is like almost a 20 book series. 20 book series, that's a lot of commitment, and that is a commitment that I'd rather put in other books that I'm more interested in and love. So I don't know about this one. I am intrigued with the magic of this world, like the politics of the wizards. Very, very interesting. And it also has a whole slew of like mythical folkloric creatures in here, so it is quite entertaining as like an urban fantasy story. So liked it, but was slightly disappointed because I was expecting to love it. So the next book I don't really want to mention because it is a beloved fantasy series, beloved in the grim dark genre. So what do you think it is? Of course, it's the first book in the First Law trilogy. This is The Blade itself. Even though this is in my most disappointing books of the year, I will say I did really enjoy this, and I think the way Joe Abercrombie writes his characters are just so fleshed out and well developed, and you're kind of on board with each of the characters that we follow, even though each of the characters we follow definitely fall under the morally gray area. So these people are most definitely very unlikable. I think maybe like one of the characters can potentially be the most morally okay, but he has a very dark past, so it's like, nah, he's still a bad guy. Each of the characters are very distinct from each other. They read very differently and their personalities are very different, and also like I'm invested in these characters. So what this book does well is developing the core characters. The plot doesn't really come into play and isn't exactly in the forefront of the story, but I know like the politics and background things that are going on in the world is about to escalate, and the story kind of ends before we really get on with the actual plot, and so that's why I was a little bit disappointed. However, I'm not disappointed in the characters and the writing. Like Joe Abercrombie, I have been a fan ever since I read his Shattered Sea series or trilogy. I've been a fan, and this one I definitely feel more attachment to the characters, so I'm very intrigued. Things are revealed towards the end of why certain characters are the way they are, and it's just got me so excited to read the second book in the series. So I won't say that this is like a bad book in any means. It's definitely one of the top reads for a lot of fantasy readers, and the First Law trilogy is regarded one of the best grimdark fantasies out there, and so I won't say that I didn't like this, but I had to struggle through it. It was so slow for me because there was nothing really happening with the plot itself. It's more like establishing the world, each of the characters' day-to-day lives. The plot didn't really take off in this book, and so that was my major disappointment. And also I thought that I would absolutely love the first book, but I didn't. However, like I said, ended up loving the characters. But yes, it's a shame that this is also in my most disappointing reads, but if anything, I am excited for the sequel, so there you go. The next book that I have here is Carrie by Stephen King. I really wanted to love this book, especially because I've heard a few people that I follow really liking Carrie. I think a friend of mine in real life also liked Carrie, so I went into this with a bit more higher expectation, and I should have went into it kind of neutral. After reading it, I was majorly disappointed by it. I will say, after reading the book, I actually prefer the 1977 film adaptation of Carrie over the actual book. However, I did appreciate a lot of the backstories and like more of the interactions and involvement of the students and what they go through. I did appreciate all the details that the book contained about each of the characters that are involved with Carrie's, of course, iconic incident towards the end. And Carrie and her mother's relationship is more further explored in this. That is a horrifying mother-daughter relationship, so it was all the more terrifying in here. Sorry, there's a truck that's driving past. Excuse you. I don't know if it was the characters, the writing style, or just like the plot itself. Something just bored me a little bit, to be honest, and that's just unfortunate. Maybe it is because I liked the movie adaptation and I was just waiting for the build up for the end sequence when Carrie just gets out of control. It was kind of boring. This honestly put me in a reading slump towards the end of the year, which sucked because I was hoping to read a ton of books in December, and because I was in such a slump after reading Carrie, I ended up reading nothing in December. Totally blame Carrie for that. I would actually not recommend Carrie, which is so unfortunate. I was looking forward to it because this was Stephen King's first published novel, and there were a ton of people that actually really liked this book. But I should have known, because there's a few people that I also follow that didn't really enjoy this book. I was hopeful that I would be in the side of liking this book, and it just wasn't it. I'm so disappointed because I loved Misery, which was a Stephen King book that I read the year before. I don't know what went wrong here. I mean, he's the king of horror, so I won't give up, but Carrie was a disappointment for sure. I loved the movie Carrie, so that was an even more unfortunate reading experience. The last book that I have is These Violent Delights. This is by Chloe Gong. I recently found out that she wrote this when she was 19. Chloe Gong is like super young, which, come on, you're super young and you're getting a book published. That is a high achievement, and I have a lot of respect for that. However, this book ain't it, my friends. I did film a review for this book, however, I haven't edited it. I will try and upload it sometime this year. I will say, yes, disappointing, didn't like it. Overall, I thought it was okay, but I think I had a certain expectation for this. This book is set in the 1920s in Shanghai. It does involve a lot of the political situations that were going on in that time period, but it's also a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and Romeo and Juliet are a part of two different gang groups in Shanghai, and so that was the perfect kind of setting that really got me intrigued, and I was really excited for this. It was rather a disappointment. I struggled to read through this, to be honest. It was pain to get through it, and towards the end I was just like forcing myself to finish it because I don't like DNFing books, and I know DNFing books are a healthy habit to have in order to not fall into a reading slump, but I just couldn't with this one. I was very curious in terms of the magic side of this, or the monster that was kind of wreaking havoc in the city. However, payoff was not that great. I wish that this didn't really have fantasy aspects, but more so gang related storylines. I think that that would have been a lot more intriguing. It just was boring to me. I had very high expectations for this, and it just didn't live up to my expectations. And I know that this book has been getting a lot of love because this is a duology. For a while there, I was considering to pick up the sequel to this. However, when I really thought about it, I didn't enjoy the book. I didn't really care about the magic or the monster aspect. I just thought that the second book is not going to improve. It's unfortunate because, come on, the concept is really, really cool, and the setting, however, not my jam. them, and I just really didn't like this book. It pains me to say it. I would not recommend this read. Very convoluted because there are a ton of things going on. The politics, the gang group rivalry, and on top of that there's like this sort of virus outbreak, and there's this monster in the city that's causing these outbreaks, and it was just too much. Too much was going on. Certain things could have been cut, and just, I don't know, the characters weren't that interesting to me, and overall highly disappointed, and hence why I'm DNFing the series. Like, I'm not going to continue on with the sequel. I am rather tired after talking about disappointing reads. It makes me sad. So that is it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed my minor rant with all my disappointing reads for the year of 2021. Of course, I didn't read that many books. Anyway, guys, do you agree with my thoughts and feels for some of these books, or are they ones that you actually enjoyed? Please let me know in the comments down below. I hope you guys are staying safe and sound, and happy reading, everyone. I will see you in my next video. Bye!